About a month ago, Xaryu did a huge brainstorming discussion with his community over on Twitch, and it produced some very interesting results on potential features to be added into Classic Plus. I wanted to talk about those results today as it gives me a lot of faith in the community wanting similar things for Classic Plus. Now, of course, Xaryu's community isn't going to dictate what the entire Classic player base wants. Same thing if you ask someone over on Reddit or the forums, it's going to be a completely different result. Especially on Reddit, it seems like the players on Reddit have a very strong opinion for a game they maybe play once a month. Anyways, let's get into the video. I've been told Blizzard watches some of my videos, so if you're watching this one, I wanted to start off by saying we need to have a poll system for Classic Plus. It's absolutely going to be mandatory in order for Classic Plus to have any sort of longevity. Using Season of Discovery, for example, only around a third of the player base continued to play that version of the game until the end of that server's life cycle, and I would argue those numbers would be much higher if there was a poll system added into that version of the game. If Classic Plus is meant to be this never-ending thing, we need to allow the community to make those decisions on how the game will be transformed. Unfortunately, you will not make every single player happy with certain decisions that get added into the game, but that's just how Classic Plus is going to be. Ultimately, this would give the developers a clear direction on which way to take the game. So for the first set of questions, we have dual talent specialization. Pretty much a no-brainer, 94% approval. It's just a great quality of life with just very few downsides in all honesty. I do wish it was still more in line with the game's fundamentals to where you had to make a conscious decision, go back to your class trainer, and then switch your specs before going out into the open world or whatever you were going to do. And I also wish that there was still a gold sink attached to it. Something simple like 1 to 5 gold, just so that there's a little bit of a gold sink still in the game, so that the economy balances out a little bit more over time. Otherwise, people are just going to go between their PvE or PvP spec and pretty much never respec throughout the entirety of Classic Plus, right? So just something to consider. Next, we got more than 2 professions, 19% approval. I assume this just means to have another primary profession. So say you could have enchanting, tailoring, and then engineering. I agree, this does not make sense. You should only have 2 primaries and that's it. The only profession I could consider adding would be something like jewel crafting, and that's pretty much it. But even with that, you would have to do a good amount of tuning to make it make sense within Classic. World buff changes, 94% approval. I agree with this. I think world buffs are kind of a chore and just adds another barrier to entry for anyone trying to play the game. You have to get your world buffs before even considering to sign up for an axe pug right now. It's just non-negotiable, and I wish the game didn't have this barrier to entry. It should be as easy as possible for a casual player to just log in and start raiding and start playing the game, you know? What will those changes be? I'm not quite sure. I guess that kind of goes into the next question below it. Remove world buffs from raid, 70% approval, and then rework over removal, 54% approval. 70% just want world buffs removed entirely. So here's my suggestion to this. I would hope they just remove world buffs from the game and then just go and tune the raids down a little bit, just removing the amount of health, maybe certain armor values to keep it more in line in how fast a raid would clear with full world buffs, just taking out the fact of more crit and attack power and stuff like that. As I'm making this video, Blizzard added a new world buff to the Anniversary Realms. This buff is identical to Dragon Slayer, but has no duration, and it works both in the open world and within instances. The buff also persists through death, and Blizzard has clarified that this is to celebrate the 21st anniversary of World of Warcraft. The buff will last for 1 week, ending on November 24th. Would you be okay with this as a solution to world buffs, or would you just want them removed entirely? Let me know what you think. I think this could work, but only inside of raids, not battlegrounds or in the open world. I personally do enjoy world buffs in a raid. Speedrunning through Molten Core with full world buffs is just an absolute blast. And as soon as you lose world buffs, it is such a drag and it's super demoralizing to play through the rest of the raid. It adds this risk to reward factor by having them and staying alive for the entirety of the raid. If they were to remove them like they have in TBC and Wrath, right, those games function perfectly fine without them. I don't know how they would do this and execute it properly, but if they were to remove world buffs, the raids would be more difficult, just flatline if they weren't to change anything. Right now, if you're playing Horde side, you're not clearing Saf KT without ZG, Ani, and Songflower for the most part. There are some raids that are doing it, but those are the exceptions, and they are spending a ton of gold every single pull. They're popping green mana pots, Flask of Distilled Wisdoms. It's just not realistic for your average raid to be doing that. It's just not fun having to have this requirement, especially on Horde side. It is just pretty much not playable unless you have world buffs and Nax. It's absolutely unrealistic to be trying to clear the raid without it. 90% of the player base will not clear Nax unless they have world buffs on their character. That is just the truth. All right, next up we got flying mounts, 10% approval. Very happy to see that no one wants this into the game. Flying mounts really don't belong. They make the world feel much smaller. It kills world PvP. Just not a good thing to be added into Classic Plus. Same thing for transmog, only 24% want this in the game. I agree. Keep it out of the game. It doesn't have a place in Classic. It defeats that sense of accomplishment with certain items, having an Atiyesh on your mage, but really you're transmogging it on all of your characters now. It just looks funny. It's just silly. I don't think it belongs in Classic. It definitely is a retail thing that we do not want in the game. And I know that that's going to be the argument for a lot of this. It's like, oh, you guys just want retail things added into the game. Well, there's a good bit of quality of life things that could be added to Classic, and they would have basically no downside. Rated Battleground, 77% approval. I agree with this. This would be a great addition to Classic Plus. I really can't think of any downsides at the moment on why this would be bad. Now, the next one, 1v1 arenas, 2v2 arenas, and 3v3 arenas. We have 69% on 1v1, 78% on 2v2, 75% on 3v3. I would say yes, just add this into the game, but they cannot touch the tuning because we would have the same problem as we did in Season of Discovery. All of the classes in raids and PvE were really balanced, but guess what? As a side effect, PvP was completely broken, completely unbalanced, and it just was not fun to play. And the same thing would happen here. If they start to tune the game around the arenas, a similar effect would happen in raids where certain classes start to fall off. They're not as strong anymore because they're tuning the game around arenas. And I know a suggestion might be, well, why don't we just tune the game around a class inside of the arena to where certain cooldowns are reduced inside of arenas, but they're increased or they're back to their normal state inside of raids. And I think it's just a terrible suggestion. We don't want to have to be jumping between two different versions of our characters. Optimized flight paths, 87% approval. This just makes so much sense. You've seen the flight path where it takes you all around the world instead of just going to a straight shot, saving you a bunch of time. Really no reason to not have this. This would make the world feel a little bit more alive as you're no longer spending a bunch of time on a flight path. You're actually landing a little bit earlier. You're able to play the game a little bit more. There's nothing wrong with a long flight path, but just make them a little bit more optimized. And this kind of goes with the second one. Additional flight paths, 61%. I don't think there's any need for additional flight paths if they're optimized. This would kind of take away from the world. If there's more flight paths, there's more flying. There's less people on the ground actually interacting and playing in the open world. Summoning stones, we have 64% approval. So I agree with this as well. I don't think it should be added. Let warlocks have that power to be able to summon, keep the world as open as possible and alive. By adding summoning stones, it definitely does take away from the open world. Warlock summon closet, 76% approval. I agree with this. Let warlocks be able to drop a closet and then summon as many times as possible with one shard instead of having to do it individually. It also makes summoning an entire raid much easier. Lower mana cost buffs, 79% approval. I would say yes to this, but I would prefer to just see raid-wide buffs rather than reducing the mana cost, because if you reduce it too much, then it could be abused in PvP. Longer buffs, 91% approval. Again, yes, this is just a no-brainer. I mean, 10-minute buffs are just absolutely miserable. It's just not fun. If you're having to single target buff players or having to rebuff them several times, or if you ever played an in-hand shaman, your weapon imbue is what, only 10 minutes? It's just not fun. Guild banks, 89%. Another thing that should definitely be in the game. This will help prevent players from getting scammed from level 1 bank alts. And it just makes everything so much easier on the guild leadership to transfer certain items between guild members, and it allows the guild members to see what items are available from the guild bank. Next we have achievements, 69% approval. I would have to say no to this because I could just see how the community is going to interact with what achievements get added. If there's some kind of undying or immortal achievement, players are going to be trying to build raids around that, and it's going to be very gatekeepy, so I'd have to say no just off of that alone. Not to mention, players are going to have, oh, we've cleared Nax, you got to link your Nax achievement to join this pug, or you're not joining. Oh, you've never cleared Nax? Well, how are you supposed to clear Nax to get the achievement? You know, you have to find a pug that's willing to take you that doesn't have that requirement now. And it's just further gatekeeping that is going to be unnecessary. The Dungeon Finder, 21% approval. I agree with this. Do not add it to the game. Keep that social interaction in the game. Make it to where you have to interact with other players, befriend certain tanks and healers, and run with those guys later on while doing your pre-bis grind. That's kind of the whole purpose of playing an MMO. Minor class changes / balancing, 95% approval. I agree with this as long as it does stick to being minor things changed to the game and it's not shifting the entire meta. Bringing certain classes along that normally don't get a roster slot, like an Enhanced Shaman or a Shadow Priest or a Boomkin, that would be cool. I'm okay with that. Giving Shadow Priest Vampiric Touch, for example, would be a great addition to where they could give mana back to the entire raid. Same thing for Boomkins, maybe give them Improved Fairy Fire as an additional debuff to make them wanted in the raid. I really don't see a huge downside to this as long as it doesn't change the entire meta. So yeah, just simple things like that to where you're not shifting the entire meta, but you're suddenly bringing some of these meme specs along to your raids. Better quest rewards makes sense. I don't know, I wish I knew exactly what that meant. 88% approval. I would assume this just means to optimize some of the quest rewards to be a little bit better. I would hope to see some of the charming items still into the game, but I do understand where this is coming from. If you do a really long quest chain and then you get Shadow Strike, for example, as your quest reward, you wouldn't be too happy about that nowadays, right? But that does add to some of the flavor and charm that Classic is, to have certain items that are just not optimized. I would agree and disagree with this, so add certain things, maybe a very difficult quest chain, you get an optimized reward. You get something that's actually going to be really strong, but still keep some of those intricate items that players don't really use, but it adds to the charm and flavor of the game. Next, we have new raids, 95% approval. Do I really need to talk about this one? This is pretty much the essence of Classic Plus. I think everybody understands that that is the main driving factor. New raids, new content, new dungeons, etc. Updates on old raids, new bosses / mechanics, 73% approval. I don't think you need to touch the old raids really. I think that's fine. I don't really agree with this one. New bosses could be cool, but I don't think you need to mess around with the mechanics or anything like that. Just leave it the way it is, in all honesty. Oh, and here we go. A poll-based system added to vote, 82% approval. I mean, this should be actually way higher than that. This is the whole reason this poll exists and the whole thing is conducted that Xaryu made. Obviously, yes, this is a no-brainer. Add this into the game. I had a whole spiel about this earlier in the video. You guys know how I feel about this. New classes, 31% approval, so no one wants this in the game. I agree. I don't think you need to add demon hunters. You don't need to add monks. You don't need to add any other classes into Classic. The way that the game functions now could be expanded upon, and there's just so much more to do with what we have already. Next, we have new races, 64%. I agree with this. I don't think there's really any need to add any new races. Sure, if you really want to. I don't think it would really change the way the game is played unless like certain racial abilities become super overpowered, but that's about it. New race / class combos, 75%. I agree with this. I think that certain classes should be able to be played like an undead hunter or a human hunter, stuff like that. No reason not to. As long as it logically makes sense, sure, why not? Raid-wide buffs, 86% approval. I agree with this. I think this is a huge quality of life that should be added to the game. Not really too much else to say there. Gonna try to go faster through some of these because we got a lot to go. Remove racial traits, 14%. I agree. There's really no reason to remove this out of the game. Modernize diminishing returns, like in TBC, 81% approval. I agree with this one as well. Remove weapon skill, 24% approval. I agree. Do not remove it. It adds that little bit of flavor to the game on certain weapons being better for certain classes and all that good stuff. Shaman tank, 66%. I don't want to see this added into the game. In all honesty, I think that it should just be a couple of tanks. You should have warriors, feral, and then pally. That's it. And the reason I say pally is because that goes to the next question. Horde pally, alliance shaman, 69%. I would have to say yes to this. I think that getting rid of the decision on what class you want to play based off of a faction is just not a good idea. You could look at Classic historically, it's always been about alliance because of paladins. Paladins are just better than shamans, and that's just the truth. When it comes to speedrunning, when it comes to parsing late game, Horde become threat capped and they're not able to do nearly as much DPS as Alliance, and Alliance just have free will. And this only starts to change whenever TBC comes around and Horde get paladins finally. You can see the numbers right now. There are more players playing Alliance than Horde. And it's the same thing on Classic Era. There are more players playing Alliance than Horde. And that's just how it would be going into Classic Plus as well. More people are gonna play Paladin because of it being on Alliance side. And so I think to get rid of that decision would be in everyone's best interest. When all your friends go Alliance because they want to play Ret and you want to play a Shaman, now suddenly you're not playing with your friends anymore. And it's just not a decision that should be made. It should be, hey, everyone's playing Alliance. Cool. I'm going to play Alliance with my friends. It shouldn't be this game-changing decision like it is right now, because Paladin are just better. Point blank, Shaman is fun. Wind Fury's great. It's a lot more fun sometimes, but statistically, Paladins are just better. Next, easy one, Instant Mail, 74%. We already have this on Anniversary. Super easy quality of life. The Barber, the Kata version, so hair and earrings only is what I'm assuming, 81%. I agree with this too. Say you mess up your character on the creation screen, you should be able to adjust it somewhat, but don't get all crazy with it like the retail stuff. Mounts at level 20, 15%, so definitely not. I agree with this. Do not add mounts until level 40. Remove combat add-ons. This is a big one. 71% approve. And what I assume by this is they mean to integrate add-ons into the UI so that it's another thing that's not this barrier to entry, because removing add-ons from the game would be very, very unfun. Not being able to see what debuffs and buffs that are important to you. There's just way too many things to list here. Just on the consensus of certain important things that are happening during the raid, as long as we're able to track that still, I'm all for removing add-ons. I think that that would be a much more fun experience for everyone. And it's going to be interesting because retail is doing that right now, so it's going to be very cool to see how that pans out. New zones, another thing that's just a no-brainer, 94% approval. Yes, 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 this is what Classic Plus is all about. Would love to see the original Hellfire Peninsula. They could maybe condense Outland so you have access to the raids, but without flight paths or any major city. Redesign the raid so that it fits as a level 60 environment. Same thing for Northrend as well. You could maybe take a boat from, say, Gilneas all the way to Northrend. Again, no flight paths, no capital city, and I think this would function really well as a level 60 environment. So let me know what you guys think about that. Flex rating, only 50% approval. I would agree with this. Just add more additional raids. Maybe more 10-man raids like Karazhan. Maybe more 20-man raids like ZG or AQ20, but don't get rid of 40-player raids. I think that this is just the fundamental of what Classic WoW should be. Having this giant group of players work towards a certain goal is just the essence of Classic WoW in my opinion, and you don't see that as much in the other versions of the game. The social structure is not as large because of the raid size being much smaller. In TBC and Wrath is a great example of this because it's a 25-player raid. You don't see these huge guilds anymore. So to me, I would love to see 40-player raids continue to live on in Classic Plus, but I would imagine we're going to get 25-player raids, which I'm quite alright with as well. Heroic Dungeon, 72%. I think this is a good idea as long as it doesn't nullify certain other gear progressions in certain other dungeons. I think this could be a good idea. This would also make your Priebus grind a little bit more straightforward since you won't have to spam arena runs to get your SGC as a warrior. AoE looting, 69% approval. I don't really see the point in having this. I think it's a bad idea for the game more than good. Being able to loot something and then anything within 10 yards of that, like it is in retail, is just an awful idea in my opinion. I can understand the argument to maybe loot a specific mob that has a bunch of other mobs stacked on top of it, like a huge AoE pull in Maraudon, for example, and you're having to loot the same area over and over and over again. I can understand that argument, but not like it is in retail. Remove logging capabilities, 58% approval. I don't think this is going anywhere anytime soon since a lot of logging capabilities like Warcraft logs is all third-party stuff, unless Blizzard goes and shuts that down. But even then, players can just look at details, see who's interrupting, who's dispelling, who's decursing, and if the healers are healing their correct assignments and all that. Proximity voice chat. This could be fun, but I see it being more toxic than anything. Only 44% approval. And for a good reason. I think it's just going to ruin the experience for newer players coming into the game, or just in general, somebody's going to ruin that experience for someone else. So we could just stick to Discord for now. How about that? More spirit healers, 63% approval. I agree with this. I don't think we need any more spirit healers into the game. Maybe a few, maybe like one or two in certain areas where it's a brutal run back, but really it's not necessary at the end of the day. Heroism/bloodlust, 22% approval. Glad to see this being so low. I don't think it's good for the game. It's definitely a step in the wrong direction on what Classic Plus should be. Level cap increase, 17% approval. Again, we should just be going from the fundamental of in-game level 60 and expanding upon that. No reason to increase the level cap. Mythic Plus, 17% approval. Again, just keep the fundamentals. We don't need to add new difficulties. We don't need to add a separate difficulty inside of dungeons or anything like that. Additional BGs, 73% approval. I agree with this. Having Eye of the Storm or other battlegrounds could be really good additions to the game. Mob/quest scaling, 3% approval. Nobody wants this, and I agree 100%. Remove Heartbeat, 17% approval. I would have to agree with this one. Don't remove it from the game. It would just change so many other factors. Now, personally, inside of raids, I would love to see this removed, especially on mind control fights like Instructor Vesuvius or Fairlina. But for PvP, I think that if you remove it, it becomes a lot more scripted, a lot more in line with how retail functions, and a lot less how classic WoW functions. Shorter mount time, 41% approval. Not necessarily a good idea to add it into the game. It would definitely kill off world PvP, being able to escape a little bit faster and stuff like that. It would be a nice quality of life, but would ultimately harm other parts of the game. Personal loot, 17% approval. I agree with this. We do not want personal loot. We want to be able to master loot things. We want to be able to decide on where certain items are going as a loot council. Personal loot is just bad. Linkable professions, 97% approval. This is a great idea. I love this idea added into the game. Increase quest cap to 30, 90% approval. Sure, why not? Extended character stats, 97% approval. Again, a great change I think should be added. HD graphic toggle like MOP or Kata, 61% approval. I don't really see the need for this. I like the OG graphics. There's really no reason to change that. Kind of the whole reason you're playing classic WoW in the first place, for that heart and soul of the way the game was originally played. Shared mob tags for questing, 32% approval. Don't add this into the game, that's just silly. Toggle on and off XP, 73% approval. Sure, I would say yes, so that twinks could cap their XP and not have to think about doing a certain zone or a certain quest. They could go and actually run the same dungeon over and over again so they could get whatever item that they're after to max out their character. Shared mob drops for questing. It depends which ones. Certain ones are quite annoying, but for the most part, I don't think we need to add this into the game. Focus targeting, only 42% approval. I'm gonna have to agree with this one. We don't need it into the game. It's just another thing that players would have to track. Although it would be nice to track what target you need to interrupt, for example. It just adds another barrier to entry, and like I previously said, we need to make Classic Plus as friendly to the casual audience as possible. Remove 1% miss when hit capped, 34% approval. I would have to agree with this for the most part. I don't think you need to remove it from the game. However, I think that your taunts should always land if you are a tank. I can't really come up with any valid argument that makes this a positive thing. Whenever your taunt resists, you lose a DPS, and then it's just a chain reaction trying to pick the boss back up. Those situations don't happen all the time, but when they do, it's just frustrating and it doesn't really add anything positive to the gameplay loop. Yeah, it's part of Classic, it's part of the fundamental like I was complaining about earlier, but I think that that's the one exception to that rule. Nameplates ranged 40 versus 20, 75% approval. I'm surprised this is only 75%. I thought it would be much higher. This is a no-brainer for me. Yes, yes, yes. Jewel crafting, rings and amulets, 84% approval. I assume this is just rings and amulets, maybe not just the profession. I'd be okay with both, honestly. I think jewel crafting is fine. Just has to be tweaked a little bit to be cohesive with how Classic functions. Horizontal gear progression, 81% approval. Classic kind of already is horizontal in some degree. You know, you always go back to Molten Core. You always go back to Blackwing Lair. There's always a piece of gear you could get out of those raids that is still good. As long as they follow that gear progression, I think Classic Plus is going to be going in the right direction. If they follow what Season of Discovery did, not so much, because pretty much at the end of the game, you either did Nax or you did the Scarlet Enclave. There was very little reasons to do the previous raids because all the other gear was completely nullified. Enchanting Golems, 56% approval. I'm sure the enchanters actually feel pretty strongly about this one to actually have it into the game, but I could care less. Keep that social interaction going. I mean, most of the time when you interact with an enchanter, it's a bot that just auto whispers you. So I don't think you're really losing too much if you add this into the game. Glyphs, 22% approval. I agree. Don't add glyphs. It just adds this other layer of complexity that we don't really need in Classic. We're playing Classic for a reason. We like the simplicity of how the game works. Keep combos on target swap, rogue/druid, 81% approval. I would assume this means just if you're keeping your combo points on your main target, if you tab off or you have to go interrupt something, you'll still keep your combo points on that main target. I think that's completely okay. Being able to swap them or transfer your combo points is a bad idea. So let's avoid that at all costs. That would make rogues and druids just one of the most broken classes in the entire game, especially for PvP. Dungeon/raid maps added. Absolutely, this makes a lot of sense. 91% approval. I agree with this completely. PvP trinket, 2-minute cooldown. So reducing it to 2 minutes. 36% approval. I don't think so. Leave it the way that it is. If you reduce the cooldown, you change the way that PvP is going to work, so just leave it the way that it is. Offhand hit chance rework, 62% approval. I say just leave it the way that it is. I don't really see the need for a rework. Maybe someone could elaborate more on this and how it would be reworked, but I really don't see the need for this. Collections tab, 67% approval. Maybe if it's only like the toys and the pets and stuff like that that are strictly cosmetics, but not a mount tab, because sooner than later, if you can mount up on a Zulian tiger and you only got it on your mage, you're going to be using that tiger on every single character. Everyone's going to be running around on a Zulian tiger and Stormwind and Org, and it just nullifies that sense of rarity. War mode instead of PvP servers, 37% approval. I agree. Don't add this. PvP servers are there for a reason. Hearthstone reduced to 30-minute cooldown, 55% approval. I'm indifferent. I wouldn't mind a 30-minute Hearthstone, but I don't care if it stays an hour either. Leveling challenges, 90% approval. This could be cool depending on what the challenges are. I agree with this. Built-in questy, 84% approval. This kind of goes back to the whole removing add-on situation, integrating them into the base UI. Would love to see this get added into the game. Another thing that comes to mind is the in-game calendar to show holiday events, DMF locations, and of course the Battleground weekend you're going into. Remove rank 14 gear from being BIS in PvE, 65% approval. I agree. I think rank 14 gear should only be best in slot for PvP, not for raids. I think rank 14 gear should also be locked behind like maybe a certain rated Battleground rating so that you have to get to a certain level. You don't just have to spam AV over and over again like it is currently. There should be some sort of level of skill to acquire certain things, and then it becomes more rare. There's a lot less people running around in rank 14 gear, has more of a rarity to it. It's more exclusive. More quests in existing zones, 92% approval. Sure, why not? That's again the essence of Classic Plus, I feel like. Reworked itemization for existing items, 85% approval. I really don't think this is necessary, maybe for specific items, but not every single thing needs to be optimized. I think it's fun to have these silly items in the game that add flavor, they add character to the game. Not everything needs to be optimized and fully fleshed out. Entire new specs, 28% approval. I agree, we don't need new specs. Keep what we got and work around that. More class-specific quests added, 94% approval. I agree. Modern auction house, 86% approval. I agree, the current auction house is pretty bad and you need an add-on in order to use it. Solo challenges like Mage Tower, 70% approval. I really don't have that strong of an opinion on this because I don't know the ins and outs of the Mage Tower, but if they do have some cool solo challenges implemented correctly, it definitely could be a good thing for Classic Plus. Account-wide attunements, 65% approval. Surprised this isn't hitting that 70% mark, and I'm kind of okay with it. I would love to have this in the game. Would be a great quality of life. The only real downside I can see to this is that it would make all of these attunement quest chains pretty much dead content the farther you get into the game. Of course, it does defeat that sense of accomplishment for completing a super long quest chain like the Ani attunement. You unlock this part of the game, and now you're able to slay the dragon. It's inherently what makes Classic WoW Classic WoW. Challenges / events around the world, 87% approval. I agree with this. This would be a great addition to Classic Plus. Dual Arena with a CD reset button, 81%. This kind of ties into the 1v1 arena thing somewhat. I agree with this. This sounds like a great idea. The dueling tournaments that we had in Classic 2019 were incredible to watch. A lot of fun, but there was a lot of downtime because you had to wait for CDs, you had to wait for certain resets and all these other things. So having a button to reset your cooldowns would be just incredible for the community. Integrate professions farther into rating, 95% approval. I agree with this one. Of course, how is it going to be implemented? As long as it's implemented properly and it sticks to what Classic is all about, I'm all for it. And then we have the Mage Table and the Warlock Soul Well, 89% approval. Big fan of this one. I love the Soul Well. I love the Mage Table. Being able to hand out these without trading players individually is just a huge quality of life. Can't wait to get this in TBC. Shout out to Xaryu for making this happen, doing this with his community over on Twitch. Hopefully we get some more of these in the future. It's been really refreshing to see how many players are on the same page with the majority of these topics. That's pretty much it. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this. And as always, I will see you next time.